Hey guys, welcome back to the kitchen. I've been away for a couple of weeks because I've been traveling around Japan, which means today's recipe is inspired by Japanese baking. Whilst we were there, we saw that lots of sweets, especially things like Kit Kats, were given a Japanese twist. So today's recipe is a Japanese take on the classic Oreo cookie, but filled instead of just with like a vanilla buttercream, it's filled with a white chocolate matcha ganache, and it's so delicious. Really easy and super tasty. For this recipe, all you're gonna need is some unsalted butter, some plain flour and some baking soda and a little bit of flaked sea salt, 2 types of sugar, light brown and castor, plus 2 types of cocoa powder, and I'm gonna get into that later. It's super easy and that's all you need. To make the cookie dough, we're gonna start with a chocolate sablé biscuit. And sablé is kind of just French for sandy, and it's almost like a shortbread texture. But these are slightly different. This started off as a recipe for a slice and bake cookie in my book, Patisserie Made Simple, but I've adapted it slightly so it makes a much nicer roll out and cut cookie, perfect kind of textured cookie for an Oreo. So what you're gonna do is take the unsalted butter, add that to the mixer, along with our 2 types of sugar, and then we're gonna mix those in a stand mixer for about 2-3 minutes, just until it's nice and creamy and smooth. We're not trying to beat it really light and fluffy like a cake because we're not trying to add lots and lots of air. We just want to make sure everything's nice and combined and we'll take the flour really easily. Once that's combined, we're gonna mix together our dry goods and add those to the bowl. And we're just gonna mix those really briefly, just until it turns from like a grey, powdery looking mixture to a slightly more moist, clumpy, darker mixture that looks like it's about to form a dough. If you mix it for too long at this stage, we end up with cookies that are a little bit tough, so just until it's combined. I want to quickly talk about cocoa powder. In this recipe, I'm using 2 types of cocoa powder, and there's a really good reason for that. The characteristic kind of look and flavour of an Oreo isn't super chocolatey, it's really dark, almost black in colour, and it has a kind of roasty flavour, but no, it's not super chocolatey. And that's because they use what's known as black cocoa powder. Now, when you make cocoa powder, it goes through a process, often, unless it's natural cocoa powder, called Dutching. And what that does is it changes the colour and flavour profile to make a more chocolatey, slightly more roasted flavour. Now, if you take that process really far, you end up with black cocoa powder. But I don't really like the flavour of black cocoa powder on its own. It's very intense and very dark, but it's not really chocolatey. And I find it a little bit off-putting on its own. But it does add really nice, dark, intense colours. So I'm using a 50-50% blend between the black cocoa powder and a really nice Dutched cocoa powder that has kind of just gone to this beautiful kind of red-brown colour. And Dutch cocoa powder comes in lots of different colours, so if you go to the supermarket and buy 3 different types of cocoa, they'll all have a different colour. So depending on what flavour you want, what style of cocoa you like, you can choose one that fits your flavour. But this is my favourite at the moment, and it's a really nice, rich chocolate flavour. So by mixing the 2 together, we end up with an Oreo that's the best of both worlds. Really nice and dark, but also an actual backbone of like chocolate flavour. So it's a really delicious cookie. As soon as that dough has gone from looking kind of grey and sandy to looking just moistened and nice and dark brown, and it's starting to clump together, that's when you want to stop mixing, and we're going to turn it out onto the work surface. And then we're just going to use your hands just to bring it together briefly into a uniform dough. And take a knife, cut it through the middle, so we have 2 pieces of dough to work with. Now what we're gonna do one at a time is place a piece of dough between 2 sheets of parchment, the same size as your baking tray, and then we're gonna roll it out until it's about 2 to 3 millimeters thick. And the reason for doing it between parchment paper is it's just way easier. No flour on the surface, it's easier to get a nice thin sheet that way, and because we wanna transfer it to the fridge, it's easy to move around that way as well. So do that to both pieces of dough and pop that in the fridge for about an hour until nice and firm, and you can lift it up as one piece. So whilst our dough is in the fridge chilling and firming up, we can make our ganache because it takes a while to cool and then set up. So what you're gonna do is take some double cream, some heavy cream, put that in a saucepan and add a small amount of matcha tea, which is the finely ground green tea. It's a beautiful kind of grassy flavour, goes wonderfully with white chocolate. We're gonna add that to the pan, and then using a small sauce whisk, you're gonna put that over the heat and then whisk that together until that's just come to the boil and it's nice and smooth and the tea has dissolved and bloomed into that cream. Take that off the heat, Pour that over the finely chopped milk chocolate, or the pieces of milk chocolate, and let that sit for a couple of minutes before you stir that together until you get a really nice, smooth, silky, bright green matcha white chocolate ganache. We're going to set that aside until our cookies are cooled, and by that time our ganache should have set up and perfect texture to be piped into our Oreos. So once the dough is nice and firm and solid in one piece, we can take a round cookie cutter. We're going to cut out as many cookies, as many Oreos as possible. We can re-roll this dough once, but we don't really want to. We want to try and get as many of those out as possible in the first go, because when you re-roll a cookie dough, it becomes slightly tougher, so you'll get slightly chewier, less crumbly Oreos. So try and get as many out the first time. They're going to go into the oven for about 10 to 12 minutes on 180 degrees Celsius or 160 on a fan oven. They won't really brown much because obviously they're a chocolate cookie, but they'll be nice and set around the outside and just slightly softer in the middle. And when they cool, they'll be really nice and crisp Oreo cookies. And then we can fill them with our matcha white chocolate ganache. So when the cookies come out of the oven, they may have bubbled up slightly around the edges. So I normally take a glass that's nice and flat on the bottom and just press them down the second they come out of the oven, and you'll get these really nice, beautiful kind of Oreo wafer style cookies. Then we put the ganache into a piping bag, just with a plain round piping tip on the end, and we're gonna pipe the filling and sandwich the cookies together. So that's how you make my delicious matcha Oreo cookies. The full recipe is in the corner as always. And if you want to leave me a comment of anything else you want to see in an upcoming video, just leave me a comment down below. For now, I'm gonna get myself a cup of milk and have an Oreo.